could record. Do you know if we're recording?
Looks like we're good.
Okay. All right, we're going to start it off. This is workshop Call Your People In.
Perfect. You're going to see the slides shortly. This workshop series is a collaboration between Make Yourself Useful and ACRE. Both are in Chicago. Make Yourself Useful is a small collective focused on anti-racist work with an emphasis on the active role of people with white privilege within movements for racial and social justice. ACRE stands for Artist Cooperative Residency and Exhibitions and is perhaps best known for a yearly summer residency for artists in Steuben, Wisconsin.
NYU is a collective. ACRE is a tiny nonprofit. All our work here is voluntary and unpaid. We are not experts, but have experimented, fucked up, studied, and occasionally done a few things right. NYU and ACRE are scrappy and conversational versus institutional and academic. Neither of these things are better than the other, but we do not speak with authority on these matters and think it's important to own that outright. We are here tonight to humbly share our knowledge that we have learned over the last 6+ years of engaging both formally and informally in the movement for Black lives. We come from an ethic that believes in the urgency of racial justice work, that leadership in these moments is most effective when held by those most affected, and that those who benefit from inherited unjust systems like racism have moral and spiritual duty to act in opposition. This workshop is designed to give you special tactical strategies to effectively support Black-led movements for liberation. In this effort, we hope to also empower all of us to do better and act on our values of justice and liberation for all.
So you've been hearing my voice for a little while now. I'm Linnea Dominic. I've been with NYU for a little over 3 years. I have been a union organizer for 4 with Unite Here, and I have been doing peer counseling for the past 5 years. This strategy is rooted in a belief that we can end racism in our lifetime. And I currently work in radio. So many years of hard conversations, listening and asking questions.
My name is Ben, and I've been working as a social worker for 7 years, 4 of those in homeless outreach, and recently started providing support to newly housed seniors. I've spent a lot of time in underground music and art scenes, where a lot of these discussions of interrupting racism, calling people out, calling in is often a heated topic of discussion. I've been with NYU for just over 1 year.
Awesome. So we are going to begin with a recent episode from Code Switch called Why Now White People? Ben is juggling many things, so he's going to start the podcast in just a minute. And if you haven't listened to the whole thing, I definitely recommend it, but we are just going to listen to the first couple of minutes.
From NPR.
All right, Shireen, so it seems like the country is having a racial reckoning. Again. As of when we are recording this, this is what the top of the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list looks like. White fragility, so you want to talk about race, how to be an anti-racist, me and white supremacy, and the new Jim Crow.
That's quite a list.
Mm-hmm.
That list kind of blows my mind. And there was a similar one on Amazon. And it does make sense because all over social media, there are these, hey, white people, you need to read this lists. They're everywhere. I mean, we were the #1 podcast on iTunes for a quick minute.
Yeah, we got the screen grabs and everything. It happened. Please believe me, Mom, it happened.
Oh, I sent that to my mom.
At first, I couldn't figure out what was going on. Like, I just suddenly had thousands of new Instagram followers, the overwhelming majority of whom appeared to be white people. And mad people started tagging us in posts and shouting us out. I could not figure out what was happening.
J-Lo tweeted about us. We were on a list created by Lululemon. Oprah Magazine did a list where we were in it. There are a lot of other places. Reese Witherspoon, that actress, put us in our newsletter. Yeah.
Get at me, J-Lo. But yeah, it's such a strange moment that we're in.
Code Switch. We're like the gym on New Year's. Only for racism.
So we have all these new followers and listeners.
Bienvenidos.
Hey, y'all, what's good?
Awesome. So I think that's hilarious and have definitely fallen into it New Year's Eve and New Year's resolution trap of the gym. So resonates. However, though the episode does go on to have a lot of questions about whether or not people will stay, I think that this moment is actually really, really exciting. So many thousands of white people are waking up and are entering the movement, want to enter the movement, and are trying to figure out how to work for racial justice and for Black liberation. And so we are just in a really incredible time where we have the ability to bring people in and really create a movement here. A friend of mine reposted this, so I'm not familiar with the person who was the original poster, just for full disclosure. I'll read it. Gentle reminder that checking people is not organizing. Instead, count how many people you brought into the movement. That number should keep increasing and be bigger than the number of people you have kicked, iced, or shamed out. Grow the movement. And I really think that the way that we are talking to other white folks really will lead to us being able to sustain this as a movement. Next slide. This is from an article that was on Medium a couple of days ago, written by Anush Georgian. Note to white allies. When you beat up on your fellow white people for being ignorant about racism, we're not helping. Those naive white people just waking up to racial justice that want to do the right thing but are saying the wrong thing because they were just born to the struggle yesterday, they are your job number one. That means us. Job. You are supposed to empathize with their white fragility, get them past their self-centering feels, and bring them over to the right side of history. Why? So people of color don't have to. So this is really important because a trap I've fallen into, and I've watched a lot of people fall into, is this desire to be a good white person and to want to talk shit about white people who are figuring it out, want to seem more woke, and will do all sorts of things to put distance in between themselves and other white folks. And as we just heard, this is not helpful. In fact, what I think that we need to do to really grow this movement is to be really loving and firm. To be loving and firm with ourselves as we recognize that we are constantly growing and learning, and to bring love and firmness to the white folks in our lives and our jobs and our families. So I want us to think about, if you could go back to that past slide, Ben. Thanks. So we need cheerleaders. If we're just beginning this work, we're gonna need cheerleaders to help us break the silence. We're gonna need people who will help us think about our analysis. We're gonna need people when we do speak up and we do it badly, who will hold us and be like, you did it though, but let's think of a better way. And we need people, if we do mess up really bad, who will listen to us, tell us they love us, and help us figure out how to be accountable to Black people that we have messed up with. So I want to take a minute, and I'm inviting you to think of however many white people that you can have in your life that you can bring in with you, and that will hold you accountable and will love you through this process. So Gwyneth, if you could start us off and time a minute. Yeah, I invite all of us to think of who those people are in our lives.
And begin. Ding.
Awesome, thanks, Gwyneth.
So I wanted to kind of start off, we're gonna talk about calling out and calling in. So obviously this this, you're all here today to kind of learn about calling in, which we'll go into, but I also wanted to talk about kind of two main strategies that people use when we're trying to kind of call injustice or kind of communicate on ideas of politics or racial justice. This is one quote that we felt kind of was very helpful to kind of to start off about someone who's arguing that calling out and calling in are two kind of different tactics we can use. They're not like in opposition with one another necessarily. And it's kind of things we need to kind of learn when to use one and when not to use the other. But I'll just read it real quick. We fuck up, all of us, but when we shut each other out, we make clubs of people who are right and clubs of people who are wrong, as if we are not more complex than that, as if we are all knowing, as if we are perfect. But in reality, we're just really scared. We're scared that we'll be the next to make a mistake. So we resort to pushing people out to distract ourselves from the inevitability that we will cause someone hurt. And that's been Dr. Chan, and I think that and sets the table really nicely just about why a lot of times people will start to kind of become aggressive or try to get activist points with other people is because they are scared that someone might come back at them. So it's a defense mechanism. I'm gonna start off with call out and like cancel culture, which are often being used together as if they're the same thing. And I think there's definitely you definitely overlap. I would say that there's definitely a lot of negatives that happen in organizing circles or even small scenes around cancel culture. People are not able to kind of speak to one another, but also cancel culture is used kind of by the right wing to kind of stifle people's voices that need to be heard. So I think that's something to keep in mind when we kind of use this language. But some of the negatives of cancel culture is it damages important relationships, causes people to become defensive, ostracizes potential allies, accomplices, stifles learning by not allowing for vulnerability, creates toxic atmosphere. Something that I noticed in college, I went to Antioch College, was a lot of kind of white people trying to out-woke each other, trying to like say who the good or bad white people are. And a lot of people's experiences coming from that college, white people were kind of, would end up blaming Black and POC people for putting on that, for identity politics as if it was their fault, and that was the culture of the campus. But it was a lot of, in my experience, a lot of white people who were kind of just being rude to each other and not kind of taking the extra step to educate, but were looking to blame. And then, as kind of said before, it kind of creates a culture of trying to score points or for personal gain and not really to do work for racial justice. Calling in is kind of a different tactic, which we'll go into a bit deeper, but it's you're speaking to another person's humanity or their better self. You're trying to de-escalate a situation possibly. You're trying to start a two-way dialogue. So you're listening to them, they're listening to you, and you want to be respectful. It can be done in small groups or accountability process or peace circles, but it's also often done kind of in private with one other person. These are kind of tenets of calling out. It often brings attention to injustice or harm that's being committed, often in a public place. It often looks to escalate a situation and grow awareness. So it's usually in a public act, either in person or on social media. And it's done to kind of highlight or cause shame onto an individual or if done correctly, a policy or law that's in effect. It's often not geared to starting a conversation with one person, but to create a larger discourse. It's important. It often is for people who are witnessing it to get involved or learn something, not always to have a conversation with one other person or for the target even. Kind of when to call in, which we're going to go into a little bit more, but it's people who share your same goals as you, people with good intentions who want to learn more, family members, friends, relationships with people you love, people you think relationships you want to hold on to, improve. And then sometimes you're kind of forced to calling in, maybe due to like, you're trying to talk to your boss when they say something racist, someone who has more power over you, and you still have to make that choice, you know, of how you want to approach a situation and how vulnerable you are, but something to keep in mind that calling out could often get you in trouble. We want to kind of just reinforce as white people as our responsibility to call in other white people in our circle to be accounted. Kind of times that it's kind of appropriate to call out is if someone's not sincerely engaging with you, someone is trolling, you might just want to close the computer, walk away, but it's certainly okay to not try to have a respectful dialogue. Someone who's being willfully harmful, if you're actually talking to kind of proud ideological white supremacists, and then also speaking out against politicians or policies or creators of such policies, then people aren't going to give you an opportunity to have that conversation one-on-one. You have to kind of bring awareness to the problem. And so that's where it's okay to kind of bring out shame tactics to kind of just highlight some injustices that are going on. It's good to remember that people in institutional power often know what they're doing is wrong on a moral level, but they're using their oppression to further their goals. This is, sorry for the fuzzy graphic, but this is kind of the best one that we could really find. And on the right, you kind of see this flow chart about different ways to prepare yourself and how to start with calling in or calling out. I think it adds some kind of nice steps. And I also wanted to highlight the other part, which is kind of, it's our responsibility to be open to being called out or called in. And that often takes work, it takes practice. So remember that you are a good person. Someone is going after your behavior, but they're not necessarily challenging you kind of on a very base level. It's always good to listen and kind of listen to yourself and listen to others and try to be empathetic. Acknowledge and apologize. It's always good to kind of say you understand what the person's saying and you understand what you did wrong and be open to that. Inquire and ask questions about how you could do better, what resources are available. And then also the best apology is showing that your behavior has changed and that you have learned from the situation.
So our ego is always in the room. When we are called out or called in, what do we all need to be reckoning with to be able to stay in this work when we're called in and called out? So that's something I invite you to sort of reflect on now or going forward. And then the other part is, what do you need to reckon with to be able to stick with white folks as we sometimes clumsily learn how to be anti-racist? What do you need to shed? What would need to shift for you to be able to do this work? We're dancing. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
So interrupting racism, also you can think of it as if you're noticing something racist happening around you at work, with friends, with family, learning how to speak up and to not be silent and to name what's going on, so that the people who are saying the thing know, oh, okay, someone else is saying that what I'm doing is not okay. And most of the time, these conversations aren't planned. They don't start in an ideal place or situation. So it does take practice and consistency to build this muscle up. This is where the love and firmness, I think, come in. We have to be firm and making ourselves do this and learn how to do it. And we can be loving with ourselves as we are learning how to do it. One of the things that was brought up in the first workshop, if any of you were here, is how we constantly need to be building on our analysis and to be aware of what's happening in the news cycle. And I think doing so increases our ability to effectively respond when we notice things that are happening. I know for myself, when I was early in this work, I didn't feel confident enough to speak up because I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to say to counter the racism I was hearing. And as I've been building my analysis, I've been finding it easier to engage. Naming with I statements, always a great practice. And if you can't act in the moment for some reason, or you do and what you say doesn't make sense, or you're unhappy with how it landed, you can always go back.
So here's kind of, if you're going to follow up with someone, kind of a way to have a conversation, and then also it's some kind of tips to get yourself motivated and to so it's very important, respectful dialogue, to use active listening, paraphrase what's been said. You want to validate someone's feelings. You can't tell someone how to feel, but you can challenge where the beliefs are coming. They might have very real emotions that coming from a place, but they've kind of had the wrong target, or they have assigned to where these feelings are coming from. It's always good to ask open-ended questions, to have someone kind of speak and that's a good way of of asking leading questions as well, to kind of have someone discuss where they're coming from, and maybe when they hear their own voice, they can kind of see some of the inherent biases that they picked up. It's always good to use information from peers or their personal stories. When I was in high school, I remember my mom kind of said there's not really racism in this progressive town that we live in, and I kind of brought up how I had a Black friend who said they walked into a clothing store, and the person at the store said, "We don't have any clothes that fit your color tone, skin tone." So I think it just, and that really opened my mom's eyes. She kind of was thought we were in a kind of a idealized town. It's always good to stay on topic. Conversations with friends and family can easily go off subject. Things get brought in from the past. Other arguments kind of get brought out. So it's good to try to always bring the conversation back to the topic at hand. It can be really difficult, but always try to remain calm. And this is one kind of tip for getting yourself ready, is to reach out to a supportive friend and let them know you want to have this difficult conversation with your coworker, your family member, another friend, and this can help them to help you, support you, and also afterwards, if you need to process, they'll be there for you. And it also kind of gives you momentum to go on and actually start the conversation once you've said that you're going to do it.
Also, since we are living in a time of pandemic and we are separated from people, having to set up conversations in advance might be more of the moment than maybe before, because we don't have as many spontaneous conversations in person. So if any of you have had a lot of success setting up these kinds of conversations with friends or coworkers or family members, I would invite you to put them in the chat so we could all learn from that. This current slide is from Seed the Way in Oregon, which is an education justice organization. And these are some of their terms and ways that they suggest interrupting racism and calling people in. I've highlighted some of my favorites. I'm curious, what was your intention when you said that? Just great. And how might your own comfort level, assumptions, expectations, experiences be influencing your beliefs, decisions, or process? This resource will be in the toolkit, and the following one will be as well. They are ways of calling people out that I think are really respectful of people's humanity and effective. All right, so we're gonna try it, and just warning, we've created some kind of intense scenarios that we're gonna ask you to respond to. So we have two different sets of role plays. The first is we need to get used to talking about prison abolition with everyone, and we need to get our mouths used to the words and our minds used to saying the ideas to people. So we've created two scenarios that you might encounter with family members. And then the second part is we need to also be ready to talk about the need to center Black trans lives. And so that one will be with coworkers. So we will do role plays for each section, but we're gonna start with the family members and practicing talking about defunding the police and prison abolition. So pick whichever one feels most applicable to you and your family situation. And then the goal is not to have the most perfect response, but to get yourself used to saying the words and sharing the ideas, and noting the places where you get stuck, noting what doesn't feel comfortable, what you need to learn a little bit more about so that you can talk about it the most effectively. And we'll all mute ourselves. Gwyneth will time 3 minutes. And you can start whenever you're ready.
Begin, yes.
And even if you're alone, feel free to talk to yourself. And
You
kind of
can
say,
record yourself on a voice app or take a video of yourself.
Okay, that was 3 minutes.
Okay, I know this is an awkward exercise, but Zoom life is awkward, and so we have to be kind of creative. But yeah, just to clarify, the goal is to get us talking and out of our heads and like really saying the words. So for this next exercise, I would encourage you to talk. If you're with another person and it's weird, lean into it. And again, you can use, if you have an iPhone, it should come with a voice recording app, or you can take a video and just talk, and then you can listen to it later. So this next part is pretend you're with coworkers and they're casually saying one of these two things, and how would you respond? All right, Gwyneth, you can start us off. Yeah.
That's 3 minutes.
Thanks, Gwyneth.
So besides maybe the exercise feeling awkward in this kind of form, how do people, what is difficult for people to have these conversations? Kind of what things come up in your life that make it hard, either to interrupt the conversation or to engage one? You can feel free to write in the chat or unmute yourself, whatever. I can't see the chat.
Strong emotions, yeah. When mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wonder, bear with me here, based on what I'm reading in the chat, I wonder if we take one more minute and practice naming everything that people just wrote down. So if you're feeling like you're having a lot of emotions, just saying that, like, you know what, I'm feeling myself having a lot of emotions right now. I feel a little upset, I feel a little confused, I feel a little self-righteous, and so I just want to share what I'm feeling. Or I'm feeling like I want to respond to what you just said, but I'm having a hard time holding on to facts, but I still want to try. Will you listen to me? Or definitely a power imbalance. I would love to talk about that more. We'll have a longer discussion. And then someone is saying, I want to be careful not to shame the person. I wonder, just saying like, I'm not trying to shame you, and if I do, please let me know. But I found what you said to be XYZ, however it landed with you. Could we take another minute and try that? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, cool. Gwyneth, can you put one more minute on the timer? Are you starting?
Yes,
Okay.
and begin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, how was that round? The naming of the emotion you were feeling. Could people weigh in? More truthful and honest? Okay. Wait, I want to call at this point, I felt like I was humanizing myself. Yes, yes, we are people in this moment too. That's so important. Thank you for sharing that.
And I think just one thing to keep in mind that I think with a lot of the initial comments is that it's really hard to do this, and every relationship you have is different, and it's almost always going to feel awkward at first. And it's also kind of not only getting better at doing it in general, but getting better at doing it with certain individuals in your life, because those relationships are different. So working on it with your mom might be different than working on it with your friend, and kind of building that rapport to talk about subjects.
Yeah, I was saying that I work in radio, so I work for liberal media, and which has been an interesting time to work in liberal media. And I've been having to speak up a lot in our Zoom meetings, and it's terrifying. And I can tell, like, when my heart is beating, that I'm not only just learning how to break my silence around racism, also breaking this way that misogyny has told me, and that I've internalized that my ideas don't matter. And so in terms of humanizing ourselves, it's like, it's all of the pieces. We get to work on all of these pieces sort of at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I think the value of sharing your emotions first is kind of reflecting on how you feel about these issues and how you feel about the action itself. And once you kind of get a better hold of how you're feeling about it, through saying that, you can move forward. And yeah, having the time or the energy or like the kind of the brain power at the moment to like say all the stuff that you want to say, or even draw on all the resources you have, can be very difficult. I think that's something that's really hard. I think often with social media too, is if someone is, is like when to know to stop for your own good, and also when to know kind of when to put more energy into it, can be very hard.
I see someone saying, talking about this with undergrads, we'll be posting a toolkit, and there's a great article in the toolkit that a professor is writing about how modeling calling in the students creates this beautiful ripple effect of growth. So thank you all for sharing these responses.
I just wanted to jump in regards to like, well, both Kelsey's posted in the chat about dealing in facts, and that really resonates. And I think it's really, it can be really difficult to like pivot from this imperative that we inherit around needing to have all the facts and all of the answers in order to have ground to stand on. And in connection with what you were saying, Linnea, about like the way that misogyny informs our anxieties around these conversations, it's perfectly fine and great and enough to have feelings and to only bring feelings to these conversations. Which can be difficult because everybody's really socialized to believe that you have to have facts, otherwise you don't have anything. But having feelings and like having, and maybe your facts are like stories about personal connections that you have with people who have been hurt by racism, white supremacy, and that's enough.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Ruby, for sharing that.
Thanks for letting me jump in.
I just saw a comment about calling in friends who aren't being explicitly racist, but are also remaining silent. I mean, to me, it seems like you could name it. Just be like, I notice you're not saying anything. Why? What's that like? Do other people have ideas?
Yeah, I think you could also, if you don't, I think asking the question also, if you found like a good article or something that you liked, you could say, I read this and I thought you might be interested in it, and just kind of have them look it over. And it's kind of a good way to kind of let people know where you're at, and also kind of help their mind going. Maybe they're missing the language, they might not know how to speak out, they might not know what to say. So it's kind of just being friendly, being inquisitive. I think that shaming people into, which happens a lot, about, everyone's being silent on this, why are you not saying something, often leads to people saying stuff that they don't necessarily believe, or they don't really know what they're saying. And so I think taking it kind of on a one-to-one approach when possible is very helpful to reaching out.
I also think that we don't have all the answers, right? Or else we would have dismantled white supremacy by now. But I think I'm going to go back to that first or one of the first slides about love and firmness is just how do we love ourselves through the process of trying and of failing and of it not getting it right, and being able to energize ourselves to keep going, and to try again and to try a new strategy, because this is really a long game. So
I want
yeah,
to respond
go
to
ahead.
Alice and Annika's question just really quickly. It made me think about just the term call in or calling in, as both like a, we are, checking in, like calling in to you, being like, hello, I'm going to like take a moment, but you're also like, you're calling people into something, right? And one of the things that I think you're calling them into is essentially their own values. Like, I think most of the people that we have in our lives are, especially with Collins that we're gonna work on, probably don't identify as explicitly racist, right? They and in fact they probably would be mortified if someone called them racist, right? So I think the question about the people who are sort of standing on the sidelines of being kind of, I think you could even approach it, be like, yeah, I know you care about anti-racism. I know this bothers you. You could even start by just assuming that of someone, and it might give them an opportunity to kind of rise to the sort of level that they need to, that they're not. It's a little manipulative, but I mean, this is all very manipulative, to be honest, for the good, for the greater good.
Ruby, your point about feelings is actually a great segue into our next portion. So if you want to hit the next slide, Ben.
So we're gonna play a video by Sonia Renee Taylor, and she is responding, and she'll kind of give a setup in herself about a video about this little girl named Haley who was getting in an argument with her parents about racism and kind of about the violence that's done to Black people. And Haley's, I think, probably like, I don't know, 12, 13, something a little older. But she gets really into it. It's actually, that video itself, I think it's kind of hard to watch because it's like very intense family dynamic and people really going at it. And her father is like pretty outwardly racist, even when he tries not to be. But I think that like a lot of people are sharing the video and kind of saying, "Oh, go Haley! You're really like, you were standing up for Black lives." And so the video we're going to show kind of really made us rethink a lot of the ways that we have these discussions. And so we wanted to share it with you, and kind of get deeper into the idea of kind of systemic white supremacy and what it means and how it operates.
And she's going to center our feelings. Like, she's asking us to look at the way whiteness lands on us and why we tolerate it and how it feels, and to have these conversations with our family.
It's gonna take me 1 second to get it, but we will.
What's up, y'all? I'm hoping this will be a quick video, but I wanted to respond. I just had someone in my DMs ask me about this video that I posted that's gone viral about the little white girl, Haley, arguing with her. What's up, y'all? I'm hoping this will be a quick video, but I wanted to respond. I just had someone in my DMs ask me.
Ben, we can't hear it.
Ben, you'll have to unmute in order for us to hear it. That's the problem.
Thanks for sticking with us. It's not a Zoom meeting if there's not one small technical difficulty, is it?
I was like, I don't want to have my voice on there, but obviously you're hearing from my computer. So, round 2.
What's up? What's up, y'all? I'm hoping this will be a quick video, but I wanted to respond. I just had someone in my DMs ask me about this video that I posted that's gone viral about the little white girl, Haley, arguing with her parents about Black people. And what I want to raise to white folks' awareness, because she's being touted and heralded as "Go Haley," and I appreciate what Haley's doing, and she's young, and she's doing something, and so I appreciate it. But here's where.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. I'm sorry. People can't. I couldn't see it. I don't think you're
What's up, y'all?
Wait, we can't see it then.
Yeah.
You want me to take it?
Yeah. So you could hear it and they couldn't hear it?
You couldn't see it. You weren't showing your screen anymore.
It's hard to do.
Sorry.
It's a really good video.
Yeah, do you mind just doing it, Kate?
I think.
Okay. Sorry.
I wanted to respond. I just had someone in my DMs ask me about this video that I posted that's gone viral about the little white girl, Haley, arguing with her parents about Black people. And what I want to raise to white folks' awareness, because she's being touted and heralded as "Go Haley," and I appreciate what Haley's doing, and she's young, and she's doing something, and so I appreciate it. But here's where conversations with white people miss the boat, and what y'all are missing in these conversations. Haley was having a conversation about Black people. Haley was arguing with her parents about whether or not Black people were worthy of life. Literally. The fact that that is a conversation is the problem. And that is actually what it was that Haley needed to be pointing out. Haley needed to be pointing out that whiteness and white people are so bereft of humanity that they will have a conversation about whether another group of people deserve to live. That white people need to be talking about whiteness. Stop talking about how hard Black people are suffering like that is happening in a vacuum. Like Black people are suffering at the hands of some amorphous blob we call the system. Black people aren't suffering at an amorphous blob called the system. Black people are suffering at the hands of whiteness and white people who live inside the delusions of white supremacy and construct systems and structures to enact the delusions of white supremacy. And so the conversation doesn't need to be about whether or not Black people are struggling in the ghetto. The conversation needs to be about why white people made a ghetto. The conversation needs to be about why white people made chattel slavery. The conversation needs to be about why white people created redlining. The conversation needs to be about why white people created mission assignments in Black and brown countries and then went to murder them. The conversation needs to be about why white people needed colonialism. White people need to start asking about their whiteness. Stop sitting around the table with your family debating about whether or not I deserve to live. The fact that you can have that conversation is the root. It is the root of the sickness that is white supremacist delusion. That white people actually have the right to sit around their kitchen tables and debate the humanity of other people's existence. Stop. When you find yourself in a debate about whether or not Black people are worthy, the work is to stop in that moment and say, this conversation is white supremacy. We are sick. And don't not include yourself when you're talking to your family. We are sick. Do you hear us talking about some other group of people as if they are some sort of object? What in us objectifies other people? What in us makes us want to do that? What in us has made it so that we created the concept of Blackness? What in us is so detached from our own sense of humanity that we could watch people be murdered on video and still go on about our regular lives like there's no big deal? What in us is so disconnected from any sense of compassion that we have had to construct system after system after system to try to tell ourselves that we're better than everyone else? As soon as you start talking about other people, stop and start talking about whiteness. Start talking about your own, not even complicity, your own shovel and bricks that you have been laying into the system of white supremacist delusion. That's what you need to do. That's what Haley needed to stop that whole conversation and say, we are sick. Listen to us. Right now, we are debating a whole group of people's lives like there's some sort of object. What in us makes us feel like we would even have the right to do that? What's wrong with us? That's the question. That's the conversation I want white people to start having with your family members. What's wrong with us? What's wrong with us that this whole system of policing that was born out of slave catching, that we still even want this? What are we so afraid of inside of ourselves that we've constructed an entire world of disconnection and violence to protect us from ever having to look at ourselves? That's the work of whiteness right now. Not to be sitting around having conversations about what Black people doing with the shambles that you have left our community in. You need to be talking about why you are inclined to leave the world in shambles. Not walking through the shambles talking about, look at the mess y'all left here. No, look at the mess you left here. So, I appreciate Haley as a young person trying to figure out how to challenge the ideas of her parents. But the problem is that she's challenging the ideas of her parents on the bodies of Black people. And the conversation is not about, need not be in your house when you arguing with your white family about Black people. The conversation in your house needs to be about the sickness that is whiteness. The sickness that is whiteness that created the police force and pays the police force to put their knees on our necks until we die. That's the system that you need to be talking to your white family about why they are so deeply invested in, and what in them is so bereft of connection that they've constructed the kind of heinous violence that we see all around us. It's time to turn the conversation towards you white people and turn the conversation towards what whiteness has wrought in this world and how you excavate it from yourself so that we might all survive. What's up, y'all?
Great, thank you for sharing that, Kate. So We want to open it up, and we want to brainstorm with each other how to take some of what she's saying and figure out how to do that for ourselves and with our families and our networks. So we're really opening it up here because we're learning and growing together. Yeah, so we would love to hear your reactions. Mm-hmm. Either one, Sean.
I wonder if it would be all right if I responded to this idea that this person is a gift that was typed. My name's Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Megan. It was just something that struck me because for the first time, because I hear that phrase and we use that a lot, and the idea of a gift is like something that is given to us for free that we celebrate. And so I just wanted to highlight it in my own brain as like, it's not a gift. It's like, it's a debt. Like by taking that information and that point of view, that is a debt that I need to pay back as opposed to something that I can be like grateful for.
How do you see paying it back? What does that look like, do you think?
I think taking the ideas that are presented there and putting them into action in myself, and then taking that work forward. It makes, a lot of times my own personal anti-racist work makes me think of cognitive behavioral therapy. That I started looking at my whiteness as like, my privilege inside whiteness as like Nerf darts, that like waking up to it was always really scary and frustrating because it's like looking in the mirror and seeing all these Nerf darts all over my body that I couldn't see before. And then like starting the work of pulling them off of myself, and then like the mark is still left behind. And then like right when I start to think I'm making progress, it's like, oh no, because like they're constantly being fired at me. But it's the privilege that the bullets are Nerf darts is like kind of the idea. And so then I get better at catching them in the air. But first it's like one hits me in the face and I'm like, oh, I missed that one. I pop it right off. And then, like I said, yeah, I get better at catching them in the air before they hit me. And then, but even some days, like I'll be, brushing my teeth and I'll be like, oh, there's one on the back of my neck that I like, how long has that one been there? And so, yeah, that continuing that work and sharing that work and doing this calling in that we're talking about would be a way to repay the debt of that she shared with us.
Thanks, Robin, for sharing both of those sets of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a comment. I'm Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi. So I'm an abolitionist, I'm a practicing abolitionist. And for me, part of my work as an abolitionist is I have to, in order to do this work, I have to practice being brave enough to tell someone when they've harmed me, and also when I've caused harm. And I think we tend to think of it in these phrases of causing harm. We need to apologize as abolitionists, right? We need to make it right. We need to repair the harm. But we have an equal responsibility to name harm. And so it's interesting today that I'm doing this because I had 2 phone calls today, one from a guy, I'm older. One from a guy I went to high school with, a hockey player in northern Wisconsin, who called me from Michigan and to have a conversation with me about everything that's going on and really ask some questions. And then another from a woman in California who, in a circle space last week, I named some harm in the circle space. And so she wanted to reach out and have a conversation. So what is it? I think it's partially that in this moment, I am choosing to be open, approachable, post small things that maybe are, little bite-sized pieces of information, and trying to, in this moment, attract rather than promote, right? So what is it about me that attracts people to the way I'm choosing to live my life? So that's one thing. The other comment I want to make is I'm also a circle keeper. And so if I can get people in circle, and for most of our families, that would be such a strange new concept. But if we start this process with you all, if you're all bringing your friends into circle for just these small talking circles, relationship building circles, then when harm happens, you already know the format. You already know the process. If a peace circle, which is when somebody's hurt someone else, needs to happen, right? So the talking circle in advance of it will have set up a process for you. And especially if you all have younger brothers and sisters or nieces and nephews, it's like, how do we start these conversations before the harm happens in the first place? And then back to my original point is being brave enough to name harm, because even though we're talking about other people, as you said earlier, whiteness and white supremacy hurt all of us, hurt all of us. And so starting from this to family, to community, to city, right, is how we start from here about how this has harmed me and also has harmed this person and this person. So just some thoughts.
Thank you for sharing. I wonder, Jenny, if that gets to the point that someone raised about how to cut through the defensiveness of whiteness, and locating, this is just an idea and I would love your feedback, but what if we locate it in ourselves first, of the way that we have noticed that white supremacy has harmed us and people we love in our lives, and use that as a way in with family members?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the conversation this way isn't possible. And a friend of mine this week did what you guys suggested earlier. We have a small group. She reached out and said, I'm done with my dad. I'm cutting him off. And we talked it through, and she decided that she would write a letter and leave the door open. And so still create some boundaries, and wasn't able to have this conversation, but could write a letter while leaving opportunity open. And so I think there are a variety of ways, because we've also been harmed by our parents too, all of us and our family members. And so sometimes those conversations can deepen those ones as well.
So I'll read some of the comments that have come in. There's quite a bit. But one of the reactions to the video, people had pretty good, strong reactions to it. People were uplifting centering whiteness as a problem, or as something that needs to be addressed. And then Patty said something about whiteness is not the default; it needs to be qualified as whiteness. So bringing that kind of into our conversations is sort of how I read that. We were sort of discussing Carly's question around the defensiveness piece. I think that's what you were speaking to just now, Linnea. And then Kelsey shared a little bit of a helpful story tactic that they use, which is my dad is Irish, and redlining was an example that got through to him. Tangible in his lifetime, the way he benefited financially. He couldn't say, I never owned slaves, but he could say, I inherited property. So that could be a useful tactic for somebody else. And Kelsey continues, it was the first moment he understood how he could owe reparations, even though his family immigrated post-slavery abolition. Carrie brings up that one avenue to get through regarding the white immigrant narrative is to relate that to what people of color and Black and Indigenous folks face. For example, why would you, or not Indigenous folks, Black folks, why would you want another family to experience the discrimination your family faced? And then Anna says, thank you, Jenny, so awesome to see you here.
I wanted to point out one thing Greg said that I thought was really great.
Yeah.
That the video is a reminder about balancing addressing individual acts of racism versus addressing systemic racism, which is something, you know, that all white people are benefiting from white supremacy. So, you know, yeah, just a really great point that I think she makes in the video that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah. I really like this point that Kelsey's bringing in reaction to the video. I think it kind of ties, builds a bridge from what you were quoting from Greg just now, Carrie, which is maybe the idea of lovingness and firmness, and of course brings it back to the quote in the beginning. Like, I'm not going to debate the humanity of people with you, but if you are open to having a conversation about the complexities of whiteness and how it hurts others as well as us, then I'm here to talk on those grounds. And I think that's a really, really awesome tactic.
I love that.
And then a few people had questions. Allie asked if people could think or reflect more on how whiteness has harmed us as white folks. And
Sure,
then,
let's take a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about where you're coming from with that comment, or give a little context? If not, that's cool.
Hi. I think it resonates with me, but I don't have words for it. Like, not on like a cognitive level. Like, I'm like, yes, when, like, absolutely, that's the conversation I want to be having. That makes so much sense. And then if I were to go to like say anything, I'd be like, but what? So like to think about prompts, like questions I can reflect on, write about, and then practice these conversations with for people that have talked exactly about this, I would really appreciate. Thank you.
One of the things that's coming in the comments from Kelsey is referring back to, and I think it relates to this point that you're bringing up now, but they say, I love how Sonia Marie Brown emphasizes white supremacist delusion. And so I would say delusion, right? Like that that's an effect that that's a negative effect that we're in, right? That we aren't actually grounded in actual reality. And that is, in a way, to be divorced from our own realities means we're also probably divorced from our bodies, our histories, our ancestry, like things that are actually kind of a trauma in a way. So that would be a kind of, expansion of that thought.
One of the frames in the peer counseling I do is that we enter oppressive roles because we ourselves have been harmed or oppressed in some way, and otherwise we would never, ever consent to oppressing someone else or acting out that role. And a lot of it comes from when we're young, and the way that our society structures caring for young people completely takes away any sort of agency or power for babies or for young people. No decision can be made, or babies are not allowed to lead. Every action is micromanaged, and children are supposed to be seen and not heard. All of these things create this sort of harm, and that initial experience leads to being more willing to side with the oppressor because you want some sort of power validation. And so it's like, how do we root out all of these things? And I think something to reflect on is like, has that shown up in your life in any way, or in our lives in any way? And
I also think it's, to make an example of like prison abolition or defunding the police, which is like obviously a big topic of conversation right now. Like, I think it's easy to see how we're all harmed by the systemic violence that is policing and that is prisons. Not just by the effect of how much money we spend on these things and how it destroys communities and how it takes money away from all these other services that every member of society could benefit from, whether that's, more social workers and nurses in schools or better public transportation or what have you. These are systems that uphold white supremacy, and they, I think that they very clearly harm everybody. So just looking at it from a more systemic lens, I guess.
And just to add on to that, I think that we live in an exploitative society. We live in a society that exploits people on class and also on sex, and all those things in capitalism are tied also to racism. So we're all kind of feeling these pressures from all sides. I don't think we can even like take white supremacy out of capitalism, at least in America. We're like the first country that was founded on as a capitalist society and kind of on a white supremacist society with slavery. And so I think it's really important to see that we could, to have a much better world if we're taking away these issues of white supremacy. It kind of affects every day of our lives. You could even say it affects a kind of, a society which places we should be working all the time and not focusing on other things. It's kind of, it plays into sexism. The certain ideas of white supremacy have been created. So I just think these things are they're all interlocked. It's hard you can definitely try to take pieces out here and there, but it's also, we all are suffering because of the society that we have created, that we have, that we haven't really created, but we're maintaining it, that we were born into.
So Liz brought up a pretty great point. I think that what this poet is saying is great as a constant reminder for us as people who want to dig deep into the layers of oppressive systems developed by white supremacy. How did these systems become? How were oppressive rules and laws created? Race is a technology of oppressive hierarchy. It's a pretty great point. And also I think the point that, that video, the poet, Sonia, uses the word bereft, and it actually, I almost believe it to be an actual reference to this Toni Morrison quote that is somewhat viral, where she talks about that white people suffer from racism in the sense that they're morally bereft, right? That they, and also that they can never feel secure that they actually deserve what they have because the system is sort of, because we live in a meritocracy, but the system actually skews towards us so favorably that we can never sort of be like, we earned it, so that being like a constant like nagging in our minds and hearts. Right, and then Liz is now talking about perfectionism, urgency, right. Only one right way, worship of the written word. Exactly. Yeah, I love that breakdown of toxic white supremacist culture in the workplace, which I think fits right into that sort of anxiety around do I deserve to be here, kind of.
Ashley also shared a PDF that's really helpful of characteristics of white supremacy culture, and it mentions a lot of these things that Liz is talking about, but I think it gives a lot of great examples if people are looking for more of those.
We have one more slide, a sort of condensed version of another video that she put up that I think is a great companion piece to the one we just watched. So if you could share your screen, Ben.
So this is kind of, I think she is in some ways responding to her own video. I would definitely she has a great Instagram channel. She does they're not stories, they're all kind of videos that you can rewatch. And she kind of goes on similar types of discussions that the one that we showed. But this one kind of goes into more about what whiteness and white supremacy is and how can you get it out of yourself. And so it's kind of, it's, you know, it's possible for a white person not to be maintaining white supremacy and whiteness. It's not something that's like actually put into you that you can never get rid of. At least, you know, obviously there's a certain level of skin privilege, but as far as like actually your actions in daily life and what you fight for, it is possible to remove white supremacy from you, or white or whiteness.
Or the Nerf arrows that you were mentioning, Robin.
Exactly. And she has a good one in this about kind of throwing away rotten tomatoes from your fridge. It's like, why would you leave rotten tomatoes in your fridge? You don't need to be ashamed of having them in your fridge. You just need to get rid of them. Don't pretend they're not there. It's only going to get worse. But this is another kind of quote from this other video.
And I'll put the link to this video in the chat also.
So I guess if there's any other questions or comments, feel free.
We haven't put the toolkit link into the chat yet, or maybe we did earlier, I'm not sure, but one thing that we just didn't talk about so much, because there's so much other stuff to talk about, is using letter writing as a way to call in or call out. And there's a bunch of links in that toolkit to both letters that folks have written to like employers or family members, as well as that can be like turned into templates, as well as like straight up templates.
We have a response to the quote. Ben, I'm wondering if you could pull it back up again. Adam wrote, "It's interesting, but I don't know what to do with it. This very insightful quote intersects with people on the opposite ideological spectrum, the ones who are eager to, quote, all lives matter, or hashtag all lives matter their way through this uprising." Adam, I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit more about what you're thinking. And you're also welcome to speak or not, so no pressure.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is just coming from having really profoundly frustrating conversations with relatives who are posting memes to Facebook about how the Irish were enslaved, and you know, this kind of like sort of horrific denial of historical reality. And I feel like there is something there's something like behind the scenes emotionally going on with them, where I feel they're really rejecting the identification with whiteness. And Sonia's quote is also, in a sense, asking for a decentering of identification with whiteness. Maybe that's just there's something there, and I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a. This is a really weird thought, but it's almost like a reverse colorblindness or something, or like yeah, it's very odd. But I see where you're going with it.
Yeah, I feel like there's this kind of paradox that's helpful to hold in this work, where you know, whiteness is real in terms of, you know, everything, why we're here. And it's a construct too. And I think that a lot of our work is to see, to identify, like, what is this construct and this, like, unjust privilege, and what is, like, what is my humanity? Is my humanity whiteness? Yeah.
I think it can also be really useful in those scenarios with family members, which I've also had in terms of like encountering people in my family who don't want to identify as white and like want to identify as Jewish. To just say, like, you know, to not necessarily see it as like, okay, I gotta change their mind right away, but like to kind of go with them on this path of like what can be a really rich and weird conversation. Like, well, what, you know, like what makes you feel not white, and do other people see you as white? Like, do you feel like when you are shopping at the grocery store, do you feel like you're not white or you are white? And just kind of like asking open-ended questions, and letting them know too that you're like there for that conversation and like genuinely interested and curious. And that can lead to like, hopefully, potentially, that can lead to maybe a shift for them, even if it's not something that's apparent to you.
And I think it's just one thing about, I think another problem with whiteness is that it erases ethnic white culture, it erases other cultures. So it's not, it's like that assimilation. And so it's not kind of, you have to give away your heritage or your culture. It's more that you have to give away kind of the violent aspects of whiteness. And I think it gets very touchy with issues of skin privilege and stuff like that, because obviously a lot of people who are forced to appear as white. Native Americans were assimilated and they haven't lost their culture, or like to hold on to it, even if they might not appear to be a person of color. So I think it is really dangerous to kind of say like, oh, you look white, so maybe you're, you know, have, you know, whiteness. You might not be carrying whiteness, but I think it is very, you know, it's very important to realize that she's not talking about destroying white ethnic culture. It's more about the violent aspects of whiteness and how that's hurting us. So no one has to, you know, whatever, stop doing their, you know, rituals, religious practices, any of that stuff, food, obviously. But actually whiteness is destroying those things. Whiteness as a construct is assimilating and kind of co-opting all of those things.
Yeah, I was mentioning this in a chat privately to Adam, but I think it's useful here, is all of those processes are painful. And when Sonia's talking about like the bereftness that we experience, it's because we've had to disconnect from that pain. So I do think that it's important to spend time with ourselves and with family members and like really mourn what we've lost. Like my grandmother stopped speaking Italian because she was afraid of getting made fun of and bullied in school. Like that's painful. I'm not saying that's the same in any way to what is going on to Black folks, but it's worth mourning for myself what my grandmother lost, what her connections to her family, what she's missing. And I think that's part of the work of regaining our humanity that she's mentioning. And like, what else have our families had to go through and experience? And I think that's only one part of the work, but I think it is a part of it that we need to make some space for.
I think that vibes really well with something that's happening in the chat right now, which is Sean is saying, getting past white guilt and shame, I think deserves discussion, because that always seems like step two after recognizing and acknowledging white supremacy and systemic racism for many folks. how to help ourselves out of that pit and support and walk with others around us who are stuck. And then I'll throw in Alice's chat as well to complicate things nicely. It feels like my family sometimes competes about who is more oppressed. And then there's this, exemplary quote, "Our family was Jewish, so haven't we gone through enough?"
I think that's when the firmness comes in. Now it's like, yes, we have gone through a lot. And also, what are we perpetrating?
Yeah, I really like what Sean's bringing up about the guilt and shame, because it is such an intense part of this work, but it's also a thing that as we go into this work, we do hear loud and clear that it's not the job of Black, Indigenous, or people of color to hold that guilt or shame or process it with us. And so since we're usually, since having conversations around race that are, conversations that we think might be for the greater good, solely amongst white people is sort of a newer thing, it seems. So, we're not in practice of maybe taking our experiences of the awkwardness of these revelations, of these conversations, of this work, of messing up, and turning to, our white, comrades in this work and processing it. But I think.
Oh, you froze, Latham. Always on the juiciest parts. It's because he said conference. Yeah. Yeah, anyone else is welcome to jump in as Latham fixes their internet situation.
Hey, so I posted the comment. I don't, if we're still okay with talking about the shame and guilt.
Yes, please, please.
So yeah, I mean, and I backpedal into that as far along as I think I am, in contributing to anti-racist work. I backpedal into it all the time. I'm gonna be honest, right after watching the video of Sonia and Renee Taylor, there's that bite at first and you're like, shit, that burns, and it made me think of how that is step two for so many folks. And I'll be honest, I'm not really good at least not practiced at yet, helping folks and walking alongside with them, that idea that, what is it, critical humility, where we're walking together in this trajectory, onto a more humane place. I'm not really good at helping other folks and sometimes myself get out of that rut. And so I just wanted to field it out to folks who, if anyone has had any success in that, or if anybody has, has tips, or who has really navigated it well. So that's just why I brought it up, because we have such a great gathering of folks here.
Thank you for bringing it up, Sean. It's definitely a really important conversation. I think in thinking about all of the new people that are being activated by this moment, I would hate for them to get stuck in shame or guilt and not be active. And so it's definitely something I think about a lot. I do want to be cognizant of people's time. It's 9:40 Central Time. So if you are feeling the need to move on with your evening, like, please do so. And for those who want to stay a little longer, great. But yeah, does anyone have anything for Sean? Oh, here's a comment. Sharing the good bad binary from D'Angelo's book has helped me a lot. Sharing how that fundamentally changed how I could step back from my own behavior and place in these systems rather than have the knee jerk, I'm not bad or racist, I'm a good person feelings. Could someone describe the good bad binary?
I think it's saying like, good people are not racist and bad people are racist. And if you are racist, you're a bad person. You know, and so it's sort of, it attaches those two things together versus saying like, okay, we're all racist because we are in racism and that's the only thing we've ever known. And if you know, if I hold those beliefs, it's not necessarily even my fault, but it is my responsibility, right? The impact that I have, and also to try to work through a set of values that are in contradiction with what my values actually are, right? So that's kind of where that plays in, I think.
Thanks, Latham.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say something, Carrie?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, you know, I think, yeah, it's totally normal to have like, you know, sort of like guilt be like your initial reaction. I think it's good to acknowledge that, but maybe just like try to watch yourself and like not get stuck in it. And I don't know, for me, I always like try to think like, okay, like how can I use this like guilty feeling and like do something useful, or like, you know, how can I turn that into like a positive, or, you know, what power do I have to like, you know, try to do the work so that I'm not just like stuck in that guilt, or like, you know, I'm not just like you know, kind of incapacitated, I guess, by it, which I think happens to a lot of people, or like, you know, people just kind of want to shut off, but, you know, pushing through that to I feel like the next feeling.
Yeah, I think guilt is just such a feeling without agency, but I think responsibility is a feeling that has a lot of agency. So I think I don't know how to, if there's a real quick way to get someone from one to the other, but maybe it's just about inviting them to sort of flip the script a little bit.
Thank you all so much for sharing. Please check out the toolkit, and thank you for sharing resources. One more comment. Thank you. Thanks, Lorelai. Thank you again so much for spending your evening with us. One of the things we want to do to close is that you write in the chat something you commit to doing, some sort of anti-racist action you're committed to doing this week, so that we can hold each other accountable. And if you want to participate in a group thread that's aimed at providing a support network for ongoing anti-racist work, please enter your phone number with the area code in the chat. And we will be sending out the toolkit and slides and any information in the next couple of days along with the survey. So you'll be hearing from us.